What makes people join cults? Unsurprisingly, there is no one answer to that question. Any number of things could drive someone into that world, that community, those beliefs. Whatever it is, the entrance can come in many shapes, many sizes, with many different faces. I dissected this as someone who used to be involved in the world of white supremacy and broke it down into 5 sections. First, we have necessity. Necessity is extremely important to note because there is always a need being filled by being involved in the cult. The cult could offer the individual any variety of things. They could give someone shelter or food. It could be something more base like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Clothing, community, family, any number of things could be used to lure the individual in. For myself, the necessity it gave me was relief from self-hatred. Through white supremacy, I found groups of people, individuals I knew, random human beings living their own lives as best I can, to demonize, to hate, to take away any value of them for my own selfish purposes. Prior to being involved, I never really had any incident with anyone who wasn't white that I could use to justify my actions. I found necessity in having someone to blame. It wasn't just that. Being a neo-Nazi gave me a false sense of power. It gave me this idea that I was intimidating to those around me, blinding me to the foolishness I was clearly displaying as a member of that community. The Nazis committed the worst atrocities to mankind. They were the last resemblance of a Roman Empire. They would have appreciated my support for them as a means to further their sickly united goal of an Aryan world. That necessity can be found in a new community that accepts and validates the individual's emotional state. You feel this way, or have this reaction, or find this acceptable because of reasons X, Y, Z. They give you that sense of communal importance, whether it's large or small, and that is welcoming and warm. You, feeling devoid of something, even if you're not sure what that something is, are drawn to this like a moth to flame. Introduction to said community varies. A family member, a friend, a romantic interest, the internet, an event, schooling of some kind, it can come from any angle, at any time, during any circumstance. Your introduction is just that, an introduction. You're meeting the charismatic people who will invite you into their group. For your sake, I hope those boundaries are clearly drawn in the sand. If not, the manipulative ones will find how to break them and bulldoze you in the process. The community will share similarities to you. The people involved will be your people, or people you want to be your people. There will be common interests and hobbies. There will be a logical reason to be around them. Kind of sounds like any of your friend groups, doesn't it? So what's the difference between them and between a cult and a normal introduction to potential new friends? The cult will close you off from your community, or try to, in their attempt to control your life. That's the difference. And chances are, you won't see it at first. Idealism is going to be the most common and obvious introduction. In America, a minority of radical Christians are involved in Christianized cults. Often, they will interpret Jesus Christ as being reborn in some image of their own. Whether it is a charismatic leader of their own or another to follow, these various groups exist in small numbers across the US. They are found abroad too. Europe has a variety that operate on smaller, quieter bases than what you would think if you're from America. They can practice and operate in secrecy and often do. But we're Americans. We need to be loud about our Kool-Aid on this side of the pond. The lines of what is and is not a cult blur when it comes to communities based on idealism. I went to a popular non-denominational church when I was 22 or so. Upon entering the building, roughly 30 people came up to me to say hello, give me a hug, and shake my hand. We went into the main auditorium for Mass, and I was given a free CD after the band stopped playing. Probably 200 people in this auditorium. After Mass, we went to a room with people our age. The table I sat down had the most interested in me people I have ever met in my life. Although I wasn't aware of this term at this time, I was being love bombed. It made me feel uncomfortable, highly uncomfortable, like I was being buttered up. Being in a space where people are friendly is one thing. Having 20 people who are really excited to hear your life story at once is another. I didn't go back for several reasons, including not being a Christian. Days after I went, I came to learn the church was known to outsiders as a cult. But because it's one where people go home every night and is Christian, we let it slide. After having my experience there, which wasn't a bad experience, just an uncomfortable one, I can't help but to agree. Every person who was my age had their entire social community within the church. The same community is volunteering, spreading the word of God in an appropriate manner, and living to their full lives within the frames of their religious beliefs. Now we get into the conversation of, are all cults necessarily bad? But that's a different discussion. Regardless, overwhelming communal support within an idealism-based church or cult isn't going to be uncommon or unexpected. If you saw the Dance with the Devil documentary on Netflix, many of those dancers were drawn to 7M because Robert Shin, the cult's leader, was a devout Christian who ran a church. He runs a church, so he must be a moral man of God, right? We can see idealism cults in far-reaching political groups as well. The political allure is a sexy one and has been since 2000. It's trendy, and probably the most popular cults today are formed around the political alliance, and it's on both sides of the spectrum. Unsurprisingly, drugs and alcohol could be your introduction to a cult. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, it's just as appealing to cult members as it is to most people, myself included. It can come in a couple different ways. It can come from the addict end in that the cult or a member of the cult will offer the addict more substances. The addict, being an addict, will appreciate this, love this person, cherish them more than anything else. The cult gave them substance, support, and love. Why wouldn't they? While heavily intoxicated, the addict will be more susceptible to new ideas. Like aliens are coming to save them from this place and will take them to live in the astral plane, where every feeling is a high feeling, or Jim Jones actually making sense, or whatever. The point is, there was a need that was being filled. For the addict, they get everything they could ever want. The same opposing effect could be found in sobriety. I'm a firm believer in the concept that the same idea that can bring you to the divine can also lead you away from it. The recovery/using addict is a perfect example of this. In the same way drugs can bring you into a cult, staying away from drugs can be another introduction. This is by no means a dig at AA or NA or even SAA. I used NA for 3 months once upon a time and found it useful, to an extent. I know many people who found sobriety from alcohol, drugs, or sex through 12-step programs. While the 12-step program was never appealing to me personally, that doesn't mean I can't recognize its mass usefulness for many people. I applaud these organizations. And if they are of interest to you, give them a try. And if they're not of use to you, well, are you an addict? Oh, you are. Then give them a try anyway and quit being a bitch. You never know, you know? It might work for you. Clearly, continuing to use isn't the right answer. So maybe a 12-step program is the right answer. At least give it a shot. The cults that prey on the sober might take a more scientific approach to their methodology. They might explain how the addict entered you through the devil, or chemicals in there, or food you eat. Just like every other type of cult, they will find their way into your psyche some way, somehow, it'll start to make sense. Even when it doesn't now, under the right amount of stress, the right amount of traumatic background, and at the right time, it will. It really is a very ugly cycle. But the hunters of the world don't care. And they will find their way into your lives when you're at your most vulnerable. Like after a relapse, or even before, during. Childhood trauma is an umbrella term for everything that would greet someone in that world. Codependent behavior they developed in childhood due to their neglectful parents is the same behavior that vultures will hunt and exploit. The fawn response they developed to avoid abuse is the same fawn response they will give when pressured to do something they are against at their core. Their desire for excess in drugs, alcohol, or sex is there to fill a hole their childhood created in them. Another vicious cycle. Challenging this is significantly more difficult, and chances are you're going to need professional help far beyond anything I could offer you alone. It won't be easy to face their truths. In facing your issues, it doesn't just stop at recognizing the roots of the issue. You need to see the reaction you've had to it. You need to take responsibility for that reaction. Excusable or not, you still performed that reacting behavior. The world is not responsible, nor is it a punching bag for your unprocessed trauma. I understand that can sound mean if you're unhealed anyway, but it's not everyone else's fault for what someone did to you. To recap, we covered 5 different introductions into a cult. Whether that cult is a religious cult, a radicalized belief, a gang, or political affiliation, the following 5 topics will cover all introductions. First, we have necessity, then community, idealism, drugs, alcohol, or sex, and childhood trauma. With this information, you can arm yourself, or ignore it, or spread it. But no, they'll come when you're vulnerable, and if not, they'll come when you're at the top. Everyone, everywhere, has the same introductions we did, myself included. All people who have been involved in some form of a cult. We took a chance on it when others didn't. That's what separates us, and that's what makes us different from everyone else. We were willing to go past that boundary. We were willing to let them violate ours. The more confident you are in yourself, and the better circle you have around you, the better community that you already have established, that you love and that you respect, that'll be the best thing to stop you from getting involved in a toxic environment like a cult. Thank you.